Hey, Senda.
Hey, Phil.
Do you want to talk about introducing safety tools at the table?
Sure, yes. I love safety tools.
Me too. And welcome to another fine episode of Panda Talking Games. I'm your host, who's almost always okay, Phil.
And I am your other host who's... where are we going with this?
Well,
Not okay?
Pick your favorite tool.
That's my favorite. You stole it.
Okay, ready? Hang on. Okay. Back up.
I mean, what do you want me to say? X-rated?
And welcome to another episode of Panda Talking Games. I'm your host who never goes anywhere without an X card in his pocket, Phil.
And I am your other host who always has some okay check-in. Senda. I'm not editing any of this. That was terrible.
Oh, wow.
Y'all. This is what happens when I don't edit this nonsense.
I'm your host, Phil, who's going to use the open door policy and just leave this show.
I'm your other host, Senda, who will draw some lines and veils, one of which is you're not allowed to leave the show.
There we go. All righty. Welcome to another Chit Chat episode, and you know it's a Chit Chat episode because all of that nonsense is in the episode and not in a bonus outtake.
Yeah, you just heard us introduce ourselves 3 times.
So this is not the unstructured Chit Chat where we just talk about like what's giving us life. We actually have a purpose for tonight's show, which we'll get to in just a moment. But just a reminder, during these pandemic times, we here at Panda's Talking Games are keeping it light, which is good for our own self-care. We are neither scripting nor are we editing our episodes.
You may have noticed.
So that creates all sorts of mayhem, as you heard before. But we are picking up topics that listeners are sending in to us, and we really liked this one that you're going to introduce in just a moment about safety, because safety is a thing that we've always been very interested in, and it's something that we actually did a lot of research for when we were working on Turning Point, a game that will be coming out sometime post-pandemic.
Someday post-pandemic, it's going to happen.
Oh, it'll happen. Mm-hmm. The manuscript's there.
I mean,
so
it's
it'll
done.
Happen.
It's basically done.
Yeah. Anyway, why don't you tell us about our question for tonight?
Yeah, sure. So for tonight's topic, Magical Girl Kira asked us, do you have any advice on getting better at using reactive safety tools like the X card? Especially in one-shots and especially with people I'm not as familiar with, I find myself falling into the mindset of just grin and bear it, which isn't fun or good. No, it's not.
No, it's not. And safety tools are fantastic. They are things that everybody should get comfortable having in their games. There are a multitude of them, which is not what tonight's episode is going to be about. So normally, we're not going to dive into all the different types of safety tools. So I'll just say this. For tonight, we'll refer to the X card as the kind of default safety tool in our discussions, unless we specifically call another one out because it has certain features or we're trying to make a point. But I highly recommend, if you want good information about the different tools, I think the link to the breakout page is still out there.
It is still there. But and there's also like, it got nominated for an Emmy. There was a really fantastic document about safety in games that, of course, because
we will find that link.
We didn't plan, we didn't script. I don't remember what it's called. It was by some amazing people. I don't remember their names. We'll find it.
I have, they have a Twitter account.
Yes.
It has a link to the safety tools.
Yeah.
And you can just get it right from there. We'll get all that into the show notes.
Yeah. Because there's all sorts of good stuff. And we've talked, here's another thing, right? We've talked about safety tools before. And this is not going to be another like basic reintroduction to safety tools because we are specifically talking about reactive safety tools, which is one kind of safety tool. It is not the only kind of safety tool, and in our opinion, is usually the kind of safety tool that should be used in conjunction with other kinds of safety tools, right? Like,
Absolutely.
As a baseline, usually for me, and you, because we talked about this part briefly before we started recording, right? We want to have something that is some sort of boundary definition about the space that we're comfortable playing in. We want to have some sort of consent revoking, so that would be like something reactive, like an X card, right? And then I really like to play with something consent affirming, because I like to, be able to say to someone, is this cool, the direction that we're heading in? Yep. And sometimes, depending on the game and depending on the group, maybe that's a formalized tool, and maybe that's just me turning to my friend and being like, I feel like there's a scene where this happens. Are you cool with that before we start? Or even in the middle of the scene saying, hey, I'm about to escalate this. How are you doing? Are we okay? Right? Whatever that is, so that you can basically negotiate and confirm consent. Because consent is safety tool.
And then the last tool, of course, consent is really the basis of all of this. But then I will just add the last tool in to the other two that you mentioned, which is a de-escalation tool, a way to bring down tense scenes, bring down high emotions, things like that. So really, we're an advocate for combining those into a safety package. But you are totally fine. Like, having an X card is a way to play, with safety, and you can do it. I've run many a game with just an X card. I don't do it very much anymore. I usually run all three together, like my little package of them. Mm-hmm. But yes, introducing them, especially when it's people that you don't know, can be a challenge, because when we know when we know the players that we're playing with, it's not a hard ask, right? Like, to be like, hey, I'd like to have these safety tools, and these are your friends, or, these are people you've gamed with before, and they're like, oh, sure, that sounds great. Even if we've never used them before, like, cool, tell us about them. But if you're playing at a con, playing at a game day, one of those things, and you're sitting down to a table of people you've never met before, it can sometimes be a bit intimidating, because, we've seen people have backlashes against safety tools, which, to me, I will always say is kind of silly, because I have written several safety articles. I have argued with people on the internet about safety tools, and I inevitably find that people generally misunderstand safety tools, right? They think it's about nerfing and not about actually pushing boundaries, right? They think it's all about padding and making everything super safe, when really everyone I know who's into safety tools is really like, hey, I'd like to really hang over the edge here. It would be cool if we had some safety equipment,
right?
To do it.
So that if I start to tip over, you can pull me back.
Yeah.
Because I'm really gonna,
Yeah.
Because that's me. I like to sit on the edge of the cliff and look over. That's what I like to do in games. I like that. It's very true. It's specifically a thing that I get out of gaming, and so yes, but I don't like it when I tip over, so I don't want to. But the other thing that I do just want to mention before we start diving in really deep on this, and this is just one of those caveat things that we have to do when we talk about safety. We are approaching a safety topic from a lens of our current understanding of safety, from our current knowledge base, from the current conversations about safety in tabletop RPGs, and our research into the LARPing community. All of these things, right? So this is a snapshot in time, and our opinions on safety may continue to evolve and change after this, and hopefully we do a good job. But like, safety conversations are ever evolving, and I think as a community and like as groups of people, we're always learning new stuff about it. So the caveat here is, this is our current understanding of safety and how we would approach this in this particular snapshot of time. And if you ask us in 6 months, this stuff may change, right?
That is totally fair. Thank you for putting that disclaimer. I'd like to put in one more disclaimer.
Yes, you should do that too.
The rest of my advice that's going to come out of here tonight is going to come from my own experience of running games. And I think it's important to acknowledge that I am a middle-aged cis male. And that makes certain things a lot easier for me than for other people. So I just want to acknowledge that when I'm talking about this, I'm aware that I will try to be very aware that the things I'm saying comes from a very privileged perspective, that there are things I can do at a table with people who have never met me that may come off easier, just because, again, cis white middle-aged dude.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I want to acknowledge it because because
thank you for acknowledging it. You
there
just have to position it, right? Like,
sure, because there are times. I mean, listen, there are times in my life, in gaming and not in gaming, where I work really hard to build consensus, and where I want to, I want to explain things and make people comfortable and things like that. And there are other times where I just do a thing, and honestly, my privilege allows me to get away with that from time to time. Like, I could just slap an X card on a table and be like, we're playing with this X card, otherwise leave.
I mean, any of us could theoretically do that.
anyone could do that. I have a high chance of pulling that off. Without anyone getting their feathers ruffled. Like, I have a high chance of getting away with it. All right, anyway, I don't want to even talk about that anymore.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the better way, and here's what I think is the real goal, right? The better way of introducing safety tools. And I think there's two parts to this, right? I think there's introducing the safety tool and making people comfortable with it at the table. But I really think that the bonus piece to that is that if you can just win them over, so that their next game or the next time they sit down and a GM puts a safety tool out, that they're like, oh, cool, I've done this before. Right?
I know how this works.
Right. So I guess the second part of it is to the long-term win, right? The short-term win is to get it to work at your table. The long-term win is to get them to want to do it in their next game.
Right.
So I always shoot for the first one, and I'm pleasantly pleased if the second one occurs.
Right. So I think, the interesting thing here is we didn't necessarily know if we were talking, if Alice was asking from the perspective of a player or of a GM. It felt a little bit more player to me, but we thought that we would address this from two angles.
Like we
do, right? So we're going to just kind of have a little bit of a chat about, like, as a GM, how do you try to create a culture of making it feel safe to use a reactive safety tool like the X card, right?
Yes.
And then secondarily, as a player, what are some of the things, if you are a player who is comfortable, what are the things that you can do to make other players at the table comfortable to use that card? Like, how can you engage in it in ways that normalize it, et cetera, right? Cool. But we're going to start with the GM stuff because that's, like, easier to visualize.
And totally my wheelhouse.
Yes.
I GM a lot.
It's like you're the forever GM.
Okay.
I'm just going to call you that. This is your new nickname. Phil Vecchione, the forever GM. We have Sean Merwin, the Mad Wizard Sean Merwin. We have Phil Vecchione, the forever GM.
Feel like I've forever GM'd. So let me throw out a first idea here.
Sure.
So one of the things that I do, so I run con games, for when I'm introducing our games to people at conventions and things like that.
Yes.
So
check.
I run convention games for people that I do not know.
Yep.
So one of the things that I do is to be consistent. And I do this as part of a much bigger thing. I have, like, a little bit of a script for introducing the game to the players, right? So, like, in the first, like, 10 minutes of the like, when everyone sits down, I have, like, a little thing I run through that kind of explains, like, what this game's about, what are we doing here today. But part of that is I have a section in there for safety tools. Right. And I think this is my first point is you should be consistent about your introduction to safety tools. Right. If you kind of are, introducing everyone at the table and, my name's Phil. I'm going to be GMing for you today. Like, oh, what's your name? What's your name? Like we go around, we do a little introductions real quick and like, hey, we're going to be playing Hydro Hackers and it's a game about Hydropunk Robin Hood stealing water for your neighborhood, on and on. And then, okay, hey, and today we're going to be using the X card, right? And I just like put it down. It gives the appearance that, one, this is very normal for you as a GM. Mm-hmm. And two, it doesn't come off as an afterthought, right? Like you don't get to just like, you're almost about to play and you're like, oh, wait. And you grab an index card and you draw an X on it and slap it on the table and you're like, oh, it's the X card, right? Like I make it a part of how I introduce the game so that it's just like literally part of the whole thing. It's part of the introduction experience. It
is definitely something that, I think the more smoothly you can introduce it and the more comfortable you are just being like, here it is, here's how it works. It's on the table and it becomes part of sort of your patter for beginning a game. That's part one of making it really normal. And the more normal it can be to have it and to play with it, the less weird and stigma-y it is for people to feel like they can engage with it. The thing that I wanted to actually mention, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but in the context of normalization, there's like, it's really interesting. I'm like trying to figure out how to tie this in. Don't mind me. So sometimes when you're sitting down at a table and you're playing a game that doesn't have a safety tool like built into it or anything, and so you're engaging other mechanics, you're layering them over the top, which is something like the X card is usually engaged in that way, right? When it's not built in like that, then people can feel like they have the option to like opt in or opt out, right? Because they're like, whatever, you just tacked this on. So the really cool thing that I've seen in terms of normalizing is actually Alex Roberts' For the Queen, which many people are playing now, which is wonderful and amazing, right? Because it's a fantastic, phenomenal game. And Alex is super good at safety stuff. We did a panel with her at Metatopia last year? The year before? Last year?
Whenever time
2018? 2019?
18,
2018? It's on the RPG panel designed RPG panel cast, I want to say. Yes. Jason Pitts. So you can actually go back and listen to it. But the thing about the way that she has specifically written the X card into that game is that it normalizes using the X card as a content editor. And when you normalize using the X card as a content editor, just in a like, this doesn't work, or not feeling it today, or like, ooh, no, absolutely not, right? Like it can cover a very broad range of reasons that you would say no. And so what it does for me, like in that context, what it makes people practice, that I'm always trying to get across in terms of using an X card or a reactive consent revoking tool at my table, is that there is no threshold of bad enough, right? Like you don't have to be in tears before you hit the X card. You don't have to be in extreme distress before you hit the X card. You can be like, ugh, I don't really like that. Let's just not. So
let me tack on to that point.
Yes.
I think one of the things that's really important is you need to be comfortable and you need to have how you introduce each tool.
Yeah.
Like you need, like, it's a thing that you can rehearse. In the case of the X card, if you get the X card material, there's a little blurb about how to introduce it.
Yeah, which is
which I think is fine. And if you've ever seen the X card that I've made,
it's written,
I have that blurb written around the edge of it.
Yeah.
But here's what I'll say: is that you should make those words your own words.
I agree.
Like it's okay to read it, but you should make them your own words. And to your point, when you put that card down on the table, it is up to you to define how you want it to be used, right? So in the case of For the Queen, Alex defines the X card in a very broad term, right? Like, we can get rid of a card that doesn't make sense, or we can get rid of a card that's emotionally harmful. And there's no difference in that, right? So you can do the same thing as a GM when you put the card down. The way you introduce it and the way that you explain it will set how it gets used at your table.
Right. So the important thing about that to me is that when we talk about For the Queen, there's, I as a player don't have to explain the difference between I'm not feeling that card and, oh God, that causes me pain, right? I'm not obliged to tell you that. I can just say no. And so I think it's important, and this is part of how I like to introduce the X card at my table, is to try and capture that idea that, you don't have to tell me why, and we don't need to know if it's terrible childhood trauma that has been following you for your entire life, or just that, like, you had a bad experience with a taco the other day. Like, it can be any of those things, and it doesn't matter. If this element of the game is going to make it less fun for you, let's take it out.
I think I'm going to tack on another piece to that.
Okay, keep going.
I hear you talking, and it's making me think of things to pull out of it.
Sure.
Which is, I think the other thing that you're trying to say is, one of the stigmas to the X card, especially the X card, because it's kind of the one that we all associate with safety,
yes,
is that it has to be used in these, like, dire circumstances where a player is, like, ghost white, covered in sweat, having some sort of, like, triggered PTSD moment. And what Alex did in For the Queen, and what you're saying here, is that we can make it less, and for lack of a better term, less intimidating.
Yes. By
actually moving it from from just being an emotional circuit breaker to being this content editing tool that we can use to kind of quick trim out things. Like, if all of a sudden I mention the president and somebody's like, okay, cool.
No, we're not
on.
talking politics.
Yeah, yeah.
It's too much. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think that's another way, is that you don't want you don't want your tool coming off as this kind of, like, if this thing goes off,
you don't,
something bad.
You don't want it to be
table.
The glass case with the axe in it that's like break glass in case of emergency, because no one is ever going to break the glass, because breaking the glass is going to set off the sprinkler system. Everything is going to come down on you, and, like, it doesn't matter if there was actually a fire or not. The entire building and everything in it is ruined and soaked, right? Like, don't make it that.
Yeah. So again, I'm just gonna recap a little.
Yes.
One, work it into your introduction routine so that it seems like it has a normal place in your setup and introduction. Mm-hmm. Two, take ownership of how you introduce the tool and choose how you want to implement it, which can be in this kind of broad sense, so that you can kind of demystify the use of the tool.
Yes.
I think that's what we've said so far.
Yeah.
I have two things that are kind of popping into my head that I want to mention really quick, if it's okay.
Yeah, you mentioned those two, and then let's talk about what you can do from the player perspective just for a couple minutes.
So the other two things you can do as a GM is, one, if you are running at cons, look at cons that have requirements for safety tools.
Yes.
So not every con does, but a lot of smaller and mid-range cons have gotten into a really good habit of requiring the use of safety tools, as well as putting safety tools on the table, which also helps to go to normalize things.
Yep.
Right? So that's another great way to normalize people to safety tools, is like, well, they're part of the con, I'm just going to use them anyway. But again, you incorporate them into yourself. The other one I was going to say is, and you touched on this a little bit, is play a game with built-in safety tools, and then I know what you're saying about it being an add-on. If it's integrated into the game, it just goes with the game.
Right. Nobody can question it. It's not an opt-in, opt-out.
Right. Where I integrate safety tools so that it's also not an opt-in, opt-out is that I consider safety tools part of my GMing style. So if you like the way I GM, it comes with safety tools. Not those are no longer separated. Those are no longer things that can be separated. Like, I don't GM the way I GM without safety tools anymore.
Yeah.
So again, going back to playing games with built-in safety tools is great. So you mentioned For the Queen, the new Fiasco.
Yeah.
The new Fiasco has a consent revoking tool in it.
Yep.
Our game, Turning Point, which you can get the...
you can get the quick start.
You can get the quick start, has a safety section built right into it. So when you play Turning Point, you will engage in the safety tools as part of the game. And if you need help coming up with an explanation, the quick start is also a script besides the rules to the game.
Right.
The script actually introduces all the safety tools of the game in the game.
Right.
And that was intentional.
It was intentional, and there are specific parts of the character creation where we basically are like, okay, do your basic safety and then check back in on safety. Like,
Yep.
Those places where it kind of goes in that routine. But
So I think our summary was to make it routine.
normalize.
Make it part of your routine.
Yep.
Normalize it for everybody. Demystify it.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Make it not scary to use.
Yeah.
Remove
and
the
again,
pressure.
the last part is just, make it your routine. Internalize it.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
Cool.
so
Okay.
let's talk about, so one of the things that can happen, and this might be more what Alice was going for, is that I'm at a convention and I walk up to a table and a GM is great and they put down an X card or some other sort of reactive consent revoking tool, right? And we start playing, but maybe I don't know the people around this table, and maybe I'm nervous about engaging that safety mechanic, even though the GM said all the right stuff and made me think the right things. If everybody else looks like they're having fun, that's pressure, right?
This is tricky because
it's hard.
This is tricky because I never want to advocate for trying to play through, like, if you need to hit the X card, you hit the X card, and let the chips fall where they may. If you're in real actual danger or trauma, just hit the X card and don't worry about the rest of it. Your safety is always more important than the rest of the game.
I'm going to stop you. Stop you because what you just said is the thing where it becomes a break glass in case of emergency, right?
Well, but because here's what I'm saying, right? Like,
this is interesting. We're figuring this out on mic.
No,
Live.
it's fine. Here's what I'm afraid to say as a player, right?
Yeah.
So as a player, I'm afraid to say, like, well, pick and choose when you use it. Like, no, don't pick and choose when you use it. You use it when you need to use it. Now, I think that depending on how the GM has introduced it, if they have introduced it as content editing, right, then by all means, the next best thing to do is actually normalize at the table by using it. Like, do a little content editing. Somebody mentions the president's name and you're like, like, not that president, right? Like, tap, tap, and that's good. If the GM has set it up and they introduced it as the emotional circuit breaker, I don't know what you do there. Like,
well, yeah. So I mean, I guess it's interesting because I don't know if we necessarily have super good advice in terms of like getting over that hump, because, oh boy, here we get into therapy a little bit, right? This is my therapy. Are you ready?
go ahead.
You are worthy of having a safe and comfortable game, even if it means that you have to mildly interrupt the pleasure that other people are experiencing. And that's a thing that is a level of confidence that I can't instill in everyone in the world and don't always have for myself, right? But it is what we want for everyone in the world.
Yep. I think you said it in a nicer way than what I was trying. I was trying to say the same thing. I think you said it more elegantly.
Because I've been in that position.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because when you're in that position at the table and you're like, oof, that was a little icky, but I'm not going to say anything because if I just am quiet, they'll just move past it really fast or whatever, right? Like, yes, there are times when being at the table and not being a cishet passing white dude means that I am making decisions about when I call out content and when I don't call out content because I'm deciding when I want to have a fight or not, right? And so, like, I get that. And that stuff, like, those are decisions that you got to make on a case-by-case basis if something comes up. And, like, do you have the mental energy? All of those things, right? But the fact of the matter is, when we talk about safety at the table, you as a human are worthy of having a safe and pleasant gaming experience, even if it means temporarily, moderately, mildly making other people at the table who are having fun stop for a second, right? Like, you're worthy of that because you are a human and you deserve to have a good experience. Okay.
I will also add on, and I think we have done this in a previous show where we've empowered people with their own personal open door policy.
Yes.
Is if a table cannot maintain its safety,
leave.
You are also worthy to get up and fucking leave.
Go away. You don't owe those people anything. Leave.
You don't owe them anything. You can just get up and leave. Go have a water, a chocolate, a coffee, whatever. Bring yourself back down.
DM me your phone number. I will call you and you can tell them, "Ooh, I have to take this," and walk away. It's fine. I'll do it. It's like getting out of a bad date. Just whatever you need to do, just do it.
Yeah. So I guess the other part as a player. All right. So worthiness is, of course, I think the most important thing.
That
right?
one and that one is tricky. That's when you have to internalize. That's one that no one else can do for you. But there are things that as other players at the table, we can do to help that, right?
Yes.
Good.
So I think another piece would be to be an advocate.
Yes.
So if somebody else needs to use the X card, you can help support that safety tool by either using it for somebody else. Like if you see, so for instance, let's say we're playing and the content is clearly making me uncomfortable, okay? But I have not said anything, right? Maybe I am worried about hitting the X card. Maybe I'm upset enough that I don't really remember the X card's there. You can hit the X card and you don't even have to call, like Senda could hit the X card and not even call me out and just be like, you know what? I'm like this worm thing is like not doing it for me. Like, can we make it something like,
can we do
something?
Can
we
make
make it something else?
Yep. And gosh, well, I'll just call this out. If you want to hear our experience where we learned that firsthand, you can listen to Royal Blood on She's a Super Geek because if you want to hear what it sounds like when safety breaks, there it is.
Right.
Once it's happened to you in person, you never want it to happen again.
Nope. So advocating for other people, I think, is a thing you can do. I think the other thing you can do is, which I think also which helps with normalization, is to enthusiastically support it. So if the GM puts the X card down on the table, be the first player who's like, "Oh, cool! I'm glad you're playing with one of those." Right.
Or even be the first player, I mean, depending on how they introduce it and expect you to use it, etc., because that can vary table to table. But, here's the thing, right? Because one of the easy things that I usually end up doing as a GM that I try to do somewhere at the beginning of the game if I'm playing with an X card is I'll sneak something in that is mine that I can X, right? So I can be like, ooh, I'm going to name that character this. Oh, never mind. That's my ex's name. We're going to just X that name out of the game really fast, right? So I can demonstrate just being like, oh, no, never mind that content. We're not going to play it. But I'm doing it to content that I came up with, so I'm not offending anyone else. Cool. The GM didn't do that. That's fine. You can still do that, player. I can still do that at any table, right? That's still something that I can do to be like, a player at this table who knows none of you. I am putting myself out here. I'm being like, cool, I'm going to trust you to play with this card the way that we've explained it and with the expectations that we're all sharing. And so right now, right here, I'm going to prove to you that I am a person who's going to respect that card by pulling it on myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think so. Showing the table support for it,
Yes.
right? Not just the GM, because listen, here's the other thing you don't know: that GM could be putting that X card down for the first time.
Yes.
So if you turn around and enthusiastically welcome its arrival,
Yes.
that GM may also take a big sigh of relief, like oh goodness, at least one of these players
Has seen this before, right?
Well, so is supporting this, supporting this thing. The truth of the matter is that the more times we do this, the more times GMs put it down and play, the more times players go to it and use it, we will create normalization. We're already making it more normal.
Yeah, it's been getting a lot more normal, which is part of the reason I think that we see so much pushback from people who don't really understand the why, right?
Yeah, I like I said, for the times that I have fought with people on the internet, and not that I like fighting with people on the internet, but I think you remember the one day I wrote an article in Gnome Stew.
Boy, do I.
I decided for 24 hours I would answer every comment that came in on the page.
That was a rough 24 hours.
It was a rough 24 hours.
But you changed a couple of hearts and minds.
You
actually did.
Over.
You actually did. Yeah.
Yeah, I was glad that there was like room for people to have discussion and understanding. But again, the thing that I learned is the pushback that people have about it is never the way the X card gets used.
Not
right?
ever.
What they think is like there's going to be an ogre in the room and they've got 3 hit points, so they're going to X card ogre, right? Like that's not how this tool is used, right? Like, but that's the fear, and that goes back to the demystifying part, right? Like, anytime we can demystify the use of this tool, the less of why are they putting the X card down on the table, kind of look we're going to get at games, and soon every game's just going to have a section in it that talks about safety. We talked about game masters and players. I'm going to put a third leg on this.
Oh yeah. This thing. Do it. I see where you're going.
From the designer point of view, right? From the designer point of view, our job in helping to create a culture of safety tools is to incorporate the use of safety tools into the designs that we make. Now, I will mention one pet peeve. I have a slight pet peeve.
Okay.
I like that Alex Roberts didn't do it, but then Fiasco went and did it. I don't think we need to rename the tools to make them catchy and fit the game that they're in, right? Like, I don't need 10.
It is a small pet peeve, though.
It is a small pet peeve, but I don't need 10 names for the X card. It's hard enough in order to normalize things. It's hard enough if we're not all speaking the same language.
Sure.
Right?
But I will say with the one in Fiasco, I think that one is specifically constructed for people who are not playing the same games that we are at all, right? Because let's not.
Right, but
let's not is far more universal, and it gets the board game people, which is where that box set is headed.
Listen, I get your point, but For the Queen,
yes,
has an X card in it.
It does.
It introduces it,
yes,
like it's no big deal, and puts it on the table all within the span of reading one card.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
It can be that way. Listen to me. This is my same pet peeve. I'm going to tell you this: renaming the safety tool after, like, to the theme of the game it falls into the same trivial bucket as why I don't like renaming the GM's role to the name of the game either. I don't make it the administrator for spy games and the space lord. I'm not interested. It's a game master. We all know whose job it is. We all know what goes with it. It's an X card. It's a consent revoking tool.
This is interesting because I actually find that I don't know if I agree with you on this one. I understand your peeve. I get it. From the perspective of a universal language.
My peeve is don't muddy the waters, right?
That's fair.
We are trying to get the use of safety tools into every game. And if the added layer that I now have to combat is translating that this thing is this thing in this game, but in this game it's this thing, and in this game it's that thing, as opposed to it's lines and veils, it's an X card, it's an open door. It's my pet peeve. Look, everybody can go yell at me on Twitter afterwards.
Well, it's interesting.
It's just my pet.
This is an entirely different conversation that this
I know. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop.
I will say I see where you're coming from, because I like having a universal language to identify what the tool is an awesome and amazing thing, right? And I don't think that we did anything magical with Turning Point, because we did basically just use a tool that already existed, right? And implement it, like tie it into our game framework very specifically.
Yes.
However, I do think that it is possible to build a specific tool into your game, and maybe you don't use it quite the same way, and then you might call it something else.
No, that's different. I'm just saying, like, for instance, if you are designing 6E, and you make an X card that has dragon heads at the ends of the X, and you call it like the dragon card. No, it's an X card. Just
make it so that all of the people playing this game understand when they sit down at another game. Yeah.
Yes, that's the whole point, right? If you have made something different, then yes, name it something different so people don't actually confuse it with the other thing, right? If your card is different than the X card, then it should have its own name.
Well,
right?
if you want to,
if your card is the X card,
we shouldn't fight about this. But I have some feelings about
getting off my soapbox. I'm taking this soapbox with me.
No, give me your soapbox. I have some feels about the reasons why they did change that for Fiasco, and I think that they were valid.
Again, it falls into my level of pet peeve as renaming the game master, which is not a lot, but I roll it every time I see it. I just like, okay, whatever.
You would play katanas and trench coats and not be the Darkest Cosmos. I mean,
you can, but are you the game master? You're the game master.
No,
I love you.
No,
I love you, Ryan.
You're not the game master, though. You are the mouthpiece of the Darkest Cosmos. It's different.
All right. That'll be a whole other episode.
Oh boy, we found another topic.
Whole other topic about how Phil doesn't like renaming the GM position.
Apparently you can't rename things.
I don't even like it called Dungeon Master, but I let that exist because I think it predates Game Master, but whatever.
How do you feel about Facilitator, though? Because I do think that there are games that have a Facilitator instead of a Game Master. Like, I don't think Turning Point has a Game Master, but I do think you can have a Facilitator, which is our...
Turning Point doesn't have a Game Master. It has a role that's called the first player, which says that you are a facilitator.
Which is the Facilitator role that we renamed. I'm just going to...
So, all right, so let me be clear. Since we're just going to fall off of our topic here because we don't edit. Let me be clear.
We have no self-control.
Let me be clear. We did not in Turning Point call it the Game Master. Why?
Because it's not.
Because it's not what you think about as a Game Master.
But we also didn't call it the Facilitator, which is what it really is.
No, it's not.
Kind of.
It's not. I'm going to explain this. Because when you play...
I know what you're going to say, actually. It's about being able to split the pieces.
You can be just the facilitator in a game of Turning Point.
Yes.
In fact, we have a sidebar in the book that says if you have too many people at the table, one person can actually pull themselves out as just the facilitator.
Which we've done a bunch,
Yes, in which case facilitator is a perfectly fine name. The facilitator role in Turning Point... we named the first player because they're also a player. And in fact, the definition of it says you're a player like everyone else. We just need you to do a couple of extra things to help the game go around.
Facilitate.
Yeah. But we emphasize the word player as part of it.
Okay.
I don't think we were accidental in that.
We absolutely were not. I just thought it was really funny.
I recall a very detailed conversation of coming up with that name.
Specific choice in a very specific conversation. I was challenging that you don't think that other people have had that conversation when they rename their Game Master role. We cannot have this conversation. We're at 45 minutes. We have to
I'm just saying, like, when Top Secret named their GM role the Administrator.
Okay.
And it's just being the GM.
That's whatever.
You haven't done anything different. You just gave your name a kitschy name for your role. Whatever. All right. Done. And
I like your soapbox, but
when we fall wildly off topic and drop down a hole where Phil gets all ranty, it must be time to reach the end of the show. But before we do that, Senda's going to tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Sure, I totally am, because I totally remember other shows on the Misdirected Mark Network now that I am totally distracted.
Just go with the one in the name. The Misdirected Mark is a show about gaming,
game mastering and entertaining you. You can join Phil, Bob, and Jerry every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. my time. You're welcome. It's really early, though, now. It's hard to get dinner done in time. But whatever. You can hang out in the chat room, and it's super cool, and you can chat with me and listen to them. And it's great. And you should.
Say, Senda, where do people find us on the internet?
You can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us in the Misdirected Mark forums, which is forums.misdirectedmark.com, or you can drop us an email, panda@misdirectedmark.com. And Phil, once they find us in one of those locations, what can they do with that fantastic information?
Please, please, please send us your topics. Even during the pandemic times, we are still taking topics and running with them. We can't guarantee we'll stay on topic.
Apparently.
We can't guarantee we won't get ranty at some point during it, but...
You're going to hear about that on Twitter.
Oh, I don't care.
You're going to hear about it.
Anyway, we really enjoy actually talking about the things that you find interesting and things that will help you in your running of games, be it a GM or player, be it a one-shot or a campaign. We are equipped to talk about all of those things. So leave us a topic, and we'll get around to chatting about it at some point. If you like what we do here or elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider supporting our Patreon campaign. You can go to patreon.com/MMP. Your patronage is what makes all of this possible, from our hosting costs to bandwidth to storage and backups to equipment, all of that stuff. All of it that's what your support does for the Misdirected Mark Network, and we appreciate it greatly. If you are a patron, you'll get access to our Slack Room for Life, which is my favorite collection of humans on the internet. It is my go-to place when I need to feel happy.
Other than TikTok.
Yes, TikTok and the Slack Room. Sometimes both, because I take a TikTok and post it in the Slack Room.
Yeah.
Anyway, you get access to our bonus outtakes. You get access to the Misdirected Mark after show. You can, we sometimes, and we haven't done it during these pandemic times, but we like to give things away, song parodies, things like that. Those things will come back around over time. But in the meantime, it is what it is. Anyway, we appreciate you all greatly. Now, if you are already a patron of the show, which thank you very much, or you are unable to patron the show, which we understand completely, there is a thing that you can do that supports our If You Listen to Us, You Will Love Us campaign. And that thing just requires you to go to the place where you get your podcasts, probably a place called Apple Podcasts, and do a thing. What is that thing?
Well, it is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice, because every new review we get wherever you leave it really does actually help new people on that platform find our show, which is super duper exciting. And we super duper appreciate it. And hey, artistic validation is one of those things that makes us super happy and warm in our hearts, which is one of those things
really does.
that just helps with the world. The state of the world as it is. Give us the jolt of endorphins, please.
Yes. Say, Senda, what are you going to do when we go back to running games at conventions to better introduce safety tools in your next game? This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Show me what
what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh? Show me what you got. Show me what you got, eh?
Clicky, click, click, click. Click, click, boom.
Oh my God, I need to silence my phone.
Oh, tisk, tisk.
It didn't go off. I remembered.
I remember now.
Tisk, tisk, me. I fixed it. I fixed it. It's all
very
fixed
good
now.
Oh, you know what? I'm looking at my...
Oh, shoot. But
No,
it has
I look
the
good.
things on it. It has
It's looking fine.
Okay, I have that. Uh-oh, my battery's dying. Everything's happening.
Nah, 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 nah. 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 Because I'm a savage. Nah, 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 nah.
But did you see the one where the 50s
No,
couple...
no. Start the show.
George, will you read the scripture for me? George.
I want you to be quiet. I want you to count to 5 to create some dead space, and then I want to start a show.
Sure. Good. Yes. Okay.
Cue music.
Do, 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 do,